Most people seem to understand that there are 3 heads to the triceps, right? Thus the word tri in front of ceps. But a lot of people I don't think seem to realize that one of the triceps is quite unique from the other 2. So what are these 3 muscles? And what is unique about the one, and how can it actually impact and inform our training decisions in the weight room? So first of all, 3 heads. We have the lateral head, I'll abbreviate as lat. We have the medial head, I'll abbreviate as med. And then we have the long head, I'll just write out long. And the lateral head kind of sits on the lateral side of the arm. Not so coincidental, and it runs like this. And this marker is not fantastic, and many people don't like my fading markers, so here's a different one. And here's the medial head, and it sits underneath of the lateral head, and it also sits underneath of the long head, which runs like this. So I'm not going to overlap them because that ends up being a disaster with these markers. Okay, but overall, what you'll notice just based on this drawing is the fact that only one of these heads, to the whole one of them is unique thing, attaches to this bone. This bone is the shoulder blade, by the way. If I didn't make that clear, which I definitely didn't, this is what we're looking at, right? So here's your shoulder blade, and here's your upper arm. Someone is just facing away from us. And so what does this mean? Why is it important that we understand that 2 of them don't attach to this shoulder and one of them does? Well, first of all, it should be clear that all these heads attach to a very similar point along the back side of a bone called the olecranon. And basically what that means is that all 3 heads have the ability to straighten the elbow. But this unique long head, which attaches again to the shoulder blade, has the ability not just to lengthen around the elbow, but to lengthen around the shoulder joint. So this is where we get to actual application in terms of what this means. The single joint heads, the lateral and the medial, they go through their full contractile range just with this. But when you do this, the long head, yes, it shortens and it lengthens, but to fully lengthen it and to fully shorten it, the arm needs to be in different positions. So for example, this would look something like an overhead rope triceps extensions, where you've effectively taken this point, and you're now stretching these fibers of the long head around the head of this upper arm so that you can lengthen it not just from the perspective of the elbow right here, but also from the perspective of the shoulder right here. And there's no necessary right or wrong in terms of where exactly you put your arms. Some people will get to this position and that's all they feel comfortable doing, more sort of up and out to the sides. Nothing wrong with that, perfectly fine. If you are someone, however, who can get your arm all the way up and overhead, that might give you a little bit of additional stretch in terms of lengthening, again, this long head around that joint. And again, it's not like when you go into that position, all of a sudden the single joint heads just shut off, right? All will contribute. But the long head, because it is at its most stretched length, may be able to produce a little bit more force than the other heads, just given that it's able to sort of move through a greater excursion of lengthening and shortening. And so the practical takeaway in terms of programming and exercise selection might go something like this, where let's say on day A or day 1, you have a neutral triceps extension, where again, your arms are at your side. And day 2 or day B, you have something that is more overhead extension based and or arms out to sides, right? So again, it doesn't necessarily need to be this whole overhead thing with a rope. If you're not comfortable with that position, you can simply just start at maybe an angle that's like this, right? Even the difference between this and this is somewhat substantial from the perspective of lengthening that long head. And so regardless of whether it's here or maybe you bring your arms forward and you like to sort of maybe have cables directed behind you or something like that, right? Whatever it happens to be, the principle is essentially just try to do something with your arms at your sides and then try to do something with your arms not at your sides. So that could be here, that could be here, that could be here. Just create some kind of variation in the same way that you would any other muscle groups, right? For training the chest, we don't just do flies. We don't just do presses. We tend to do both because each of those things accomplishes something slightly different and potentially beneficial for different reasons that can contribute not only just to hypertrophy and strength improvements, but also just overall function of a joint, overall robustness of a joint, and overall survivability in training as a consequence. So if there's any takeaway from this, it's simply just to understand that there are 3 heads of the triceps, one of which acts on the shoulder in some regard. And because of that, we want to make sure that we're not just doing one kind of extension, but that we're also checking the box of something overhead or something out wide.